Hello and welcome back to Reimagining Cyber. My name is Ben, and with me I have our cyber expert, Tyler Moffitt. Tyler, how are you doing?
Doing well. Really excited about an interesting topic today, so I'd love to dive into it.
Yeah, indeed. It's a story with one of those headlines where you read it once and you assume that you've misunderstood something. A ransomware negotiator has been sentenced to nearly 6 years in federal prison in the US because he was secretly helping the ransomware attackers. Tyler, is that actually what happened?
Yeah, basically, and it gets worse and crazy the deeper you go. So his name was Angelo Martino, and he worked as a ransomware negotiator. So I guess to explain this, imagine you're a company, you've just been hit with ransomware, right? Your systems may be down, your data potentially stolen, executives panicking, legal involved, crisis comms, cyber insurance involved, like every hour that you're offline costing you money, nightmare scenario, right? And you bring someone in whose job is specifically to help you navigate probably the worst cyber incident your organization has ever experienced. And according to the Justice Department, Martino was taking confidential information from those victims and feeding it directly to BlackCat ransomware actors so they could maximize how much money the victims paid. And he wasn't like just playing both sides. He knew the other side's cards and was telling the attackers what they were.
You say there that he knew the other side's cards, which I guess raises the question, what does a ransomware negotiator actually know?
Well, ideally, assumably a lot, a whole lot. I mean, think about the negotiation process is trying to determine, what happened, how badly is it, how bad is it, how badly is the company impacted, can they recover, what do they have access to, do they have backups, how long will that recovery take, what data was stolen, the business impact. If you're hit at 8:30 a.m. Monday with ransomware, can you even get up and running before the week's out, like the business impact, the insurance situation. I mean, I would say most importantly from a negotiation standpoint, what can this organization realistically pay? And that's very valuable information, right? The negotiator needs to understand the victim's position because their entire job is to negotiate from that position. The ransomware actor may demand $20 million, but maybe the company, only has $5 million in the bank or something like that. And maybe insurance only covers a certain amount of that, or maybe the company has a hard internal seal. I don't know. Executives may be willing to wait a little while, not too long. Maybe they're about to collapse, after 12 hours or 3 days. You don't know. I mean, all of that information the negotiator is working, and it has value. Okay. The ransomware attackers, like, they usually have to figure that out. They have to try and feel it out or get as much information about the company when they're data exfiltrating or snooping around, right? And not all of that is apparent. And so as a direct ransomware negotiator, specifically according to this, Department of Justice, Martino provided BlackCat actors with all of the victims' insurance policy limits and internal negotiation positions, so they get to maximize it. He was basically handing the answers the key as far as like the maximum possible payout they could even achieve.
And that's the really hard bit to wrap your head around, isn't it? The fact that he's representing the victim and he's also feeding info to the attacker.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you look at the details reported from the court records, it gets kind of absurd. CyberScoop reported that 5 victims hired Digital Mint, and Martino was assigned to negotiate on their behalf on as part of Digital Mint. And the reporting describes him as effectively conducting negotiations against himself and his co-conspirators because of the information he was secretly passing through, these unauthorized back channels. There's one exchange from the plea agreement that I want to read to you because it tells you basically everything you need to know. According to CyberScoop's review of the court records, Martino told a BlackCat affiliate that the insurance carrier was only approving smaller amounts. And then he reportedly told them, keep denying our offers and I'll let you know once I find out the max they want to pay. And if you think about that exchange for a second, he's supposed to be negotiating the ransom down, but privately, he's allegedly telling the hackers, don't accept our offer yet. I'll find out our maximum once you keep denying. Like, that's insane to be able to push that limit and barrier.
And if you are an attacker, knowing that insurance limit, the internal maximum, is incredibly powerful, isn't it?
Absolutely, because ransomware negotiation, with imperfect information usually, and the attacker wants the maximum amount of money from the victim is capable of paying, right? And the victim wants to minimize the amount of money they have to pay, right? And hopefully not really having to negotiate at all. If I'm a hacker and I've ransomed you and I demand $20 million and you offer me 1 million, I have to make a decision. Like, are you bluffing? Is it 1 million realistically all you can come up with? That's still $1 million. Can you actually afford 10 million? Is your insurance company refusing or denying or limiting? Like, are your backups working? Can you bounce back from this? And 1 million is actually a convenience fee that you're willing to give me. And if you wanted, you could just sort of, bounce back and not pay me any money at all. Are you losing $5 million a day? I don't know. That's the whole point. That's part of the negotiation, right? Imagine someone on the victim side privately messages me and says, hey, they're insured up to this amount. Their current offer isn't their maximum. Just keep rejecting it, and then we can find out what their ceiling is. The negotiation is over, right? They already know how much pressure to apply, and this isn't like theoretical. I mean, according to the court records cited by Cyberscoop, the 5 victims Martino helped negotiate for paid. They combined $75.3 million. One nonprofit reportedly paid $26.8 million, and a financial services company paid $25.7 million, and some hospitality company paid $16.5 million. These are huge numbers. These are eight figures? 8 figures.
Now, when I first saw this story, I thought it was about an insider selling information, but apparently it went even further than that.
Yeah, much further. This is where the story takes another turn. So let's dive right in. According to the DOJ, Martino also admitted to conspiring with Kevin Martin and Ryan Goldberg, who are 2 other cybersecurity professionals, to actually deploy BlackCat ransomware against additional U.S. victims between April and November a few years ago, 2023. So we're no longer talking about someone secretly leaking negotiation information. They've now become ransomware affiliates. So 3 men agreed to give BlackCat administrators a 20% cut of ransom payments in exchange for access to the ransomware and the BlackCat's extortion platform. They successfully extorted 1 victim for 1.2 million in Bitcoin. And then according to the DOJ, they split their 80% share 3 ways and laundered the proceeds. And all 3 worked in cybersecurity. And I've thought, like, daydreamed about how this is all possible, and I'm like, yeah, I could do it, but I would never actually do it. And these are people who've done it.
Okay, let's talk about BlackCat for a second. Then we've covered them before, but how does someone go from working in cybersecurity to suddenly deploying BlackCat ransomware?
Well, I mean, today with the criminal, marketplace and ecosystem that it is, I don't have to build ransomware. It's an entirely like ransomware as a service model. I basically just raise my hand, right? BlackCat, which is now known as ALPHV, and also joined Ransom Hub. They changed names of whoever were operating. They're a criminal platform, okay? They maintain and develop the ransomware payload, okay, and the infrastructure and the extortion platform and all the communications and everything, right? So, and it's a profit sharing organization. And so BlackCat specifically, it targeted more than 1,000 victims worldwide. And in this particular conspiracy, again, most of this damage is being done by affiliates. So Martino, Martin, and Goldberg became affiliates and agreed to pay BlackCat's administrators 20% of any ransom received. It's pretty standard. It's pretty normal. And BlackCat just provided the platform and the infrastructure, and the affiliates provided the victims. And that's basically the cybercrime gig economy. And honestly, like, what makes this case especially interesting is that these weren't inexperienced cyber criminals trying to learn cybersecurity, right? These are cybersecurity professionals. They understood incident response. They understood how defenders operate, and also ransomware negotiations. And so that is why they were able to do so much damage, because they're able to disclose the entire situation, how desperate they are, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's their cybersecurity background. It's making it far, far worse from an attack perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's why this caught on. I don't know. It's kind of crazy, to be honest. Like, I wondered if this would ever happen, and apparently did. And it was like only now we're discovering, and it happened like a couple years ago. So, we've talked before about attackers specializing. Initial access brokers specialize in getting access. Ransomware developers build payloads. Affiliates are the ones that deploy the ransomware, but they're the ones conducting the nastiest parts that usually get them caught because they're the ones dealing with the victims for payment, right? The money laundering to move cryptocurrency, which you're not good at, that's how you get caught for sure. But imagine taking, someone who understands the defender's process and putting them on the attacker's side. All right. They know what an incident response team is looking for. They know what executives are discussing. They know how cyber insurance works. They know how negotiators are trying to lower ransom demands. They understand all the pressure points because they've literally done this and sat in the room with victims and done all the crisis, right? It's incredibly valuable intelligence. And, I've spent years talking about threat actors learning our tools and techniques, but this is different on another level. I mean, they knew the processes because they were literally part of the processes. So it's tough.
Now, if you have been involved in some kind of cybercrime, if you've been hit by something, you're getting in a ransomware negotiation firm or an incident response company. You're putting total trust in these people. But this story, it's thrown a massive spanner in the works there, hasn't it? It's the trust levels at the moment. People are going to be there's going to be that level of suspicion there, surely.
Yeah, when you deal with your insurance or negotiator that they assign you, they're like, hey, you're not going to screw me over, are you? It's tough. Yeah. It creates a difficult conversation. I do want to be careful at Hill because this is an extreme case, okay? This isn't something I think everybody should be expecting. Digital Mint told CyberScoop it had no knowledge of Martino's criminal activity and that his actions were deliberately concealed from the company, right? So this isn't Digital Mint's fault. They were bamboozled, right? The company said that it terminated him and suspended his access when the Justice Department notified of the investigation, and they sort of figured it out, right? They also said that Martino used separate unauthorized communication channels accessible only to him and BlackCat, probably, through Onion and Tor and Tox and all that stuff. But so I'm not saying organizations should suddenly distrust every incident responder or a ransomware negotiator. That's not what I'm saying, and I think most people would understand that. But we got to recognize the sensitivity of these roles. Right. And during an incident, we tend to think about privileged access technically, domain admin, cloud admin, backup administrator. But information is also a privilege too, right? And insurance limits are privileged information. Your recovery capabilities are privileged information. All that stuff. Your internal negotiation ceiling, the fact that your backups failed, that your CEOs demand them systems be restored by Monday because they can't handle, they're losing the X amount of dollars every day. If an attacker knows those things, bam, their strategy just got way stronger.
Yeah, that's interesting regarding information, because we normally think of ransomware negotiation as arguing over a number regarding information itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest misconception, right? This information warfare. Both sides are trying to understand the other's position. Attacker wants to know, how desperate are you? How valuable is this? How quickly can you recover? What's your insurance ceiling? How much downtime can you tolerate, right? And the victim wants to know, is this attacker credible? Do they actually have the data? How much data do they have? Does their decryptor even work if I pay them? Have they honored payments before? You really do have to trust the bad guys to not attack you again, or that you won't leak the data anyway if I pay you. Are you bluffing? How quickly can you get me my data out? Can you negotiate? All that stuff, right? That's why Martino's position was so valuable to BlackCat. He didn't need to give him a new exploit. He didn't even need to write the malware. He could just say, don't accept that offer. We can pressure them to pay more. Right. And that's it's pretty silly when we're talking about millions of dollars being negotiated here.
Yeah, let's talk more about the money. Apparently, this was very, very profitable.
Yes, if we're talking about how much money this guy made just from his cuts, Martino himself, law enforcement seized more than $10 million. And that was digital currency, vehicles, a food truck, a luxury fishing boat. I mean, there's likely more than just the $10 million in assets that they tried to seize, right? CyberScoop also reported a Bayfront home estimated to be about $1.68 million, another home that was worth about $400,000. So yeah, I mean, it ended up getting him a whole bunch of cryptocurrency, houses, cars, food, a boat, asset lit goes on. But, it also demonstrates why he was taking this risk, why he was doing something so, how do you say, egregious on the ethics barometer. The money was enormous. And according to prosecutors, Martino wasn't simply accepting a one-time bribe. he was basically described in the documents as a double agent working to maximize the harm to his clients and the financial gain to the, cyber criminals paying him a cut of that ransom.
If I missed anything here in US dialect English, if you like, to UK, a food truck, a truck where you sell food from it. Sorry, that's what it means to me, like a burger van.
Get out of this. Eventually, once I'm done screwing over all these companies, I'd like to start, selling tacos out of my truck. I don't know.
For people listening in the UK, I imagine it's something like a kebab van.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Is this, it won't be, is this really then a ransomware story, or is it an insider threat story?
I guess both. I mean, you've got the insider threat angle. That's incredibly important. When we say insider threat, people imagine like an employee downloading files before quitting or whatever, or stealing intellectual property, like we saw with OpenAI and the Apple phones being sent over. But, I don't know. This is a little more dangerous version. This is a trusted professional who's like embedded in a crisis, in the response, in the process, allegedly providing like crucial, critical information directly to the threat actor, right? The organization's already compromised. They're already vulnerable, high pressure scenarios, decisions, and they're basically making it even worse, right? That's about as bad as an insider threat can get.
Okay, takeaway time. Sorry, takeaway as if not from a food truck, but takeaway time, what one should take away from the story. What should organizations, be learning from this?
Treat incident response and all the information and scenarios around it as highly sensitive, right? Not just technical logs, business impact, right? Insurance information, recovery timelines, your negotiating positions, who knows what information, where is this all being discussed, who has access to those conversations? Like that's extremely important. You also want to understand your third-party response ecosystem before the incident. The worst possible time to figure out who your ransomware negotiator is, or who your forensic firms is, or how your cyber insurance response process workflow is at 2:00 in the morning when, you're running around with your head cut on fire. You got to vet those relationships beforehand, understand who gets access to what, have context, have communication procedures and processes, right? Know who is authorized to speak for the organization. And I guess third, limit the information based on need, right? Not every person involved in an incident needs every piece of information. Your technical responders, you may not need to know really the insurance ceiling, right? The negotiator may need certain business information. That doesn't mean some outside contractor need access to literally every single internal executive discussion or decision. And finally, maintain visibility, right? The same principles we apply to privileged technical access should apply to sensitive incident response workflows. Who accessed that information, who communicated externally, all that stuff. Can you audit it later? I mean, trust is necessary, but blind trust is like not a security control here.
And there's also some irony here because law enforcement, they've spent years going after BlackCat.
Yeah, BlackCat's a big player, right? And they're still going too. Unlike Lockbit, who was really big in front of the limelight for years, doing well, bouncing back, but finally basically all but dead. BlackCat just sort of rebanned ALPHV, Ransom Hub, you name it, whoever. But this is, I agree. This case is just another piece of a larger disruption effort, right? In December 2023, they disrupted BlackCat infrastructure because that year I think they went after like the casinos, right? And so they helped hundreds of victims restore systems and prevented about $100 million in ransom payments, which is great. And we've talked about this before, but taking down a ransomware website doesn't magically eliminate the ransomware economy, right? Every cryptocurrency transaction creates another potential trail, especially if you do it wrong. Every co-conspirator creates another human who can make a mistake. So Martino pled guilty in April of this year, and Kevin Martin and Ryan Goldberg had already pleaded guilty and were sentenced to 4 years in prison. And Martino has now been sentenced to 70 months in prison, which I don't know, seems kind of light personally, and then just seized $10 million in assets. But how many millions does he have hidden away in crypto that was laundered? Well, I don't even know. So he gets out in 70 months? Like, I don't know.
You're a throw away the key kind of guy, aren't you, Tyler?
Maybe longer than 70 months. I mean, that's like some people's loan on a car.
Okay, then, finally then, what sticks with you from this story, would you say?
For me, information. we spend so much time talking about ransomware payloads and the underground, underlying infrastructure around it, initial access, encryption, data exfiltration, right? But once your organization is compromised, like there's an entirely another battle starts. The battle is now over information. How bad are you hurt? Can you recover? How much money can you pay? How much is in the bank? How much can you increase that with insurance? All that stuff. The desperation, right? And Martino was basically trusted with those answers. And he secretly gave those answers to the ransomware actors to squeeze more money and then took a cut, right? And then eventually joined other cybersecurity professionals like myself to deploy BlackCat ransomware on other victims. And so this is what makes the case so remarkable, and I had to talk about it, right? The ransomware negotiator wasn't just talking to the hackers, he was working with them. And so if there's one lesson for organizations, during a cyber crisis, you're going to bring people closer to your most sensitive systems, your most sensitive information, and like your decisions, right? You need trusted experts, but that trust doesn't mean abandoning your security fundamentals, right? Know who has access, control the sensitive information, maintain that visibility, right? And understand that in a ransomware incident, information itself can become leverage.
And just to reiterate what Tyler said earlier on, Angelo Martino was sentenced to 70 months in federal prison with a restitution hearing scheduled for September. Tyler, a fascinating story. Thanks for breaking it down.
Absolutely. I hope everyone listening enjoyed it.
We will see you next Wednesday here on Reimagining Cyber. In the meantime, do remember to rate, review, and recommend the show. Thanks again for listening. Goodbye.